السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Thank you guys for joining me this afternoon. I appreciate you giving me your time, and hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, after this discussion, we'll have just a little bit more clarity about what is going on and where we stand and where we should be as a community. And I'm speaking more so to the Muslim community today, even though I know that we might have a lot of African American or whatever you identify with, person of color that may not be Muslim, that may be listening. But I want you to just kind of focus on what I'm talking about today. There was an article that I wrote back in 2016. It was titled, Courage is Grace Under Fire. And it was talking about the Islamic position on protests and peaceful demonstrations. And I see that, that same conversation is necessary today, where you have many Muslims who have either remained silent throughout this whole entire ordeal, or Muslims who have been vocal about not really caring about Black Lives Matter, or vocal about, some scholar in some remote country telling them that they don't have to get involved with the demonstrations or the protests. And then some of us are just kind of sitting here just waiting for somebody to say something that will make us feel a little bit more comfortable. I'm going to lead with just a portion of the article that I wrote. The article that I wrote, I shared it on Facebook just maybe about an hour ago. I shared the link on Facebook. I wrote this article in 2016. So as you can see, this conversation is ongoing since then. I think at the time that I wrote the article, it was based upon another police officer murdering another African American. And here we are today, almost 5 years later. You know what I mean? Like almost 5 years later, and we're still having the same conversations, and Muslims are still confused as it relates to where they stand in the middle of all of this. And I'm still trying to figure out, how is it that we are still confused? Our book is very clear. Our religion is very clear. Our book is very clear as it relates to where we stand in the face of injustice. Why is there ever any question about where we stand as it relates to injustice? Why is there ever any discretion or any, misunderstanding as it relates to where we stand in the face of blatant oppression and persecution? There is no doubt. There's nothing that is ambiguous in our religion as it relates to the mawqif al-Muslim, lada al-fitna or lada al-dhulm, that the position of the Muslim as it relates to where he or she stands in the face of injustice and oppression. It's very clear. So I'm going to just read to you just a portion of what I wrote, and then I'm going to start my discussion. I started off the article with a statement by John F. Kennedy, who was eventually assassinated by the same system, the same system that he was trying to expose for their oppression. You understand? John F. Kennedy, he said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. I think that's very clear. That if we can't change the system peacefully, then there's only one other option after that, and that is to change it violently. And that is what you see happening today. That is what you see happening in the streets. I'm not talking about the looters and I'm going to get to all of that. I'm talking about the people who genuinely stood up against what they saw of, George Floyd being assassinated, murdered in broad daylight in front of everybody. And for some people, that meant nothing to them. I had one Somali guy jump on and say, his miswak was more important than, a life being taken and people protesting. His wudu, wiping over his sock. And he was very, very arrogant about it. And I'm going to tell you why he felt so comfortable saying that. We in the Muslim community, immigrants, Somalis, Arabs, Pakistanis, you have paved the way for people to make comments like that. That a man being murdered in the street. Meanwhile, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you murdered a man, then it's as if you had murdered all of mankind. Meaning a lack of respect for one person's blood is a lack of respect for all blood. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you killed one person, then it's as if قَتَلَ النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا, it's as if you have killed all of mankind. Because to have a lack of respect for the life of one person, that means that you don't respect any life. And for a person to say that my miswak or my wudu is more important to me than Black Lives Matter and this whole movement and everything associated with that, I'm going to tell you why that young man felt so comfortable as a Muslim to say that. Because we gave him the keys to do that. When you get on a minbar as a prominent imam, connect all of the dots. All of the dots are connected. Everything that we have been dealing with from October, from the moment the Somali imam got on the minbar, Sheikh Raghi, I don't even want to call him a sheikh, but Sheikh Raghi, to get on a minbar and to say that majority of African Americans were born from zina. You understand? It's all connected. Don't separate the incidents. They're all connected. For him to get on a minbar on Friday in front of, a whole congregation of people and to have a recorder on him and it being recorded. You understand? And for him to make that comment in public with no fear of repercussions, with complete impunity, speaking freely about how he felt about African Americans. And then when I spoke to him on the phone and he said to me that I don't care that he apologized. I'm not talking about whether he apologized or not. That's not my issue. Stay with me. Don't lose sight of what I'm saying. I'm connecting the dots for those of you who don't understand. For those of you who see these incidents as isolated incidents. They're not isolated incidents. They're not isolated. They're all connected. For him to get on the minbar and say that in public and voice how he felt about African Americans. And then when I called him on the phone and he said I was referring to the non-Muslim African Americans. I wasn't talking about the Muslims. I was talking about the non-Muslim African Americans. And I said, well, Sheikh Raghi, I'm a convert. So basically you're talking about my mother. You're talking about the mothers of, like majority of the Muslims here in America are converts to Islam. So what are you actually saying? And if you were bold enough to voice that opinion on the minbar, then I can only imagine what conversations you've had in private amongst your own constituents. I can only imagine. I can only imagine, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said that قَدْ بَدَتِ الْبَغْضَاءُ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ وَمَا تُخْفِي صُدُورُهُمْ أَكْبَرُ. That enmity and hatred has appeared on their tongues, but what their hearts harbor is far worse. What they hold in their hearts is far worse. If you got on the minbar and you said that on the minbar, I can only imagine how you really feel about African Americans. I can only imagine. And then now, another video comes out of a young Somali man who says that, Black Lives Matter don't mean anything to me. My mismak and my wudu is more important to me than any of all of this stuff. You can now see why he felt so comfortable saying that. Now do you understand? And I'm also going to get around to the immigrant community as well. To put up a post and to say that you're sorry or what is happening to African Americans, it's really a slap in the face, because immigrant communities do the same thing to African American Muslims on a day-to-day basis. In immigrant masjids, in immigrant communities, you do the same thing to African American Muslims. It's a slap in the face for you to post on social media about how disgruntled you are, and how, heartfelt, you are, and how passionate you about justice, and how you feel sorry for what's happening to African Americans, when the immigrant Muslim community does it to African American Muslims every single day. When you walk past an African American Muslim and you don't give him the salams, you don't acknowledge them as Muslims, you do it every single day. And then to turn around and put out a post and say that you stand in solidarity with the oppressed. I'm really trying to figure that out. How? I'm not talking about the young Somali himself. I'm talking about why he felt comfortable making that comment. Sometimes I think when people speak, you guys hone in on the wrong stuff. I don't care about what he said, because what he said doesn't affect me as an African American. His words don't hold any weight. You could post it on a million social media sites that he don't care about Black Lives Matter. It ain't going to affect our lives one iota. His words don't have any power except the power that we give to it. What I'm focusing on is why he felt so comfortable saying it, and the hypocrisy in the Muslim community. That is what I'm trying to shed light on. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Much speculation has circulated throughout the American Muslim community with respect to our role and position amid the ongoing protests and demonstrations in this current climate of hostility and heightened frustration. This was back in 2016. I wrote this. And here we are today. The American Muslim community finds itself caught in the crossfire of a social revolution. That's what you guys are witnessing right now. We're having a cultural revolution right here within the confines of our own country. We're having a social revolution. That's what you guys are witnessing. It has been happening, and it will continue to happen until those who are oppressed get their right. But the American Muslim community finds itself caught in the crossfire of a social revolution, trying earnestly to stay neutral in a state of injustice where neutrality lends to the position of the oppressor, not the oppressed. So while you are trying to stay neutral, while you say to yourself, I see that it's wrong, but African Americans kill each other too. And so, while you're sitting here toying with these ideas, trying to make yourself feel more comfortable about where you are in the middle of a social revolution. Make no mistake about that. And while some people use the sympathy, stick, like, I feel sorry for you guys over there, right? The Muslim community, I feel sorry for you guys over there. Meanwhile, you're trying to stay neutral because you're trying to appease your white counterparts, the people that, you placate their feelings. And we all know what happens, like how you get out in the street and you stand in solidarity with the LGBT community. But I don't see any of you standing in solidarity with the African American community. Please, I'm shaking my head about that. I'm shaking my head about that. I think it was Yasser Qadhi who did a piece on, there was a clip of him talking about, he tried to play it in a way where it wasn't, just trying to be politically correct. I don't necessarily agree with the homosexual lifestyle, but they do have a right to be gay and homosexual. We'll play with the words, because we're in public, so we want to be politically correct, right? Omar Suleiman, I stand in solidarity with the rights of, LGBT and their ability to, not be oppressed. Where the hell is your solidarity now? Where in the hell is your solidarity now? I'm confused. Because if there was anybody from an Islamic standpoint that you are obligated to stand in solidarity with, it would be the African Americans who are being oppressed and not the LGBT community. You follow what I'm saying? If there was anybody from an Islamic standpoint who was more justified and you standing in solidarity with them, it is the African American community who are constantly being persecuted and tortured and oppressed by the levels, not just level of oppression, the levels of oppression. You understand? Not one word of solidarity, not one action of solidarity. Ilhan Omar, you standing in the streets with homosexuals and gays and you dancing in the middle of the street with them. Where are you now in the midst of what's going on in Minneapolis? Where are you now? Where's your solidarity with the people who deserve solidarity? The hypocrisy of the Muslim community, man. I, as an African-American Muslim, reserve the right to criticize my ummah. You gotta be kidding me. All these, Islamic articles and all of these beautiful academic articles that, you placate in the feelings of everybody else to say that, homosexuals and lesbians and gays, they have a right to their lifestyle. I don't necessarily agree with it, but they have a right to their lifestyle and we stand in solidarity with them. But African Americans, where's the solidarity? I'm confused. That's what you call selective activism. Selective activism. Selective advocacy and activism. You pick and choose who you want to stand up for because it suits your overall agenda. I get it. You playing chess. I get it. But in the midst of you playing chess, don't think that other people are blind to what's going on and what we're seeing. You had the Palestinian sister. I'm forgetting her name. Someone please remind me of her name. The Palestinian sister. What's her name, please? I can't remember her name for the life of me. What's her name? The Palestinian sister who stands in solidarity with Linda Sarsour. Thank you. Linda Sarsour. Let me undress this whole situation where she wrote a post that I was exposed to the other day about giving some clarity to what happened and who really called the cops. This woman had the audacity to write an entire Facebook post. And some of you that are listening right now, some of you probably like the post because you play both sides of the fence. You go over here and you see what this one is talking about and is, singing their praises. Oh, we love you, brother Shadid, blah, blah, blah. And then when somebody say something over here, you over here praising them too. Like, you really need to get your life together, man. Get yourself together. You praising everybody. You want to play both sides of the fence. Nah, the lines have been drawn in the sand. You got to take your place, man. Take your rightful place. Stop praising this one over here, praising this one over here. Sometimes I go through stuff and I see the person. I'm like, why are you praising them? And then I see you on my page. Like, I don't need your praises. I'm not doing what I do for praises. But Linda Sarsour goes and writes this whole Facebook page about who really called the cops, trying to exonerate the store owner, Mahmoud, right? Trying to say that he wasn't even at the store. He employs from the neighborhood. He doesn't sell alcohol, doesn't sell pork. I mean, but that's the exception to the rule. That's not the rule. The vast majority of the bodegas that are owned by Arabs and Pakistanis sell pork and liquor in the black community. Make no mistake about that. We got one right here, a couple of them right here in Delaware. It's actually a smoke shop. And I'm always amazed that I got to stop there and get gas, and I got to go in and pay for the gas. And your whole entire store, you're selling blunt papers and smokes and vapes and all of this stuff, and the hookah pipes and all of this stuff, paraphernalia. You sell it all. And then I see you in the masjid and you walk right by me, it's just so ironic that you see yourself to be more of a Muslim than I am. But your whole income, the entire way that you earn your income is haram. All of it. All of it is haram. So don't sit here and say, oh, they don't sell alcohol, they didn't sell pork, they hire from the community. If they didn't sell alcohol, they didn't sell pork, because we don't really know, we don't live there. We're going off of what you're saying. But the people who live in Minneapolis, live in Minnesota, they know best. But I can tell you from what I know, and she's from New York, she knows just as well as I know. The vast majority of the corner stores and bodegas that are owned by Palestinians and Yemenis, you sell alcohol, you sell pork, because you see the non-Muslim African Americans as spit on the street. You see them as nothing. And that is why you can disrespect a Muslim that converts to Islam who's African American. This is why you still don't see us as equal. This is why you still don't regard us as real Muslims, because you sell pork, you sell alcohol to African Americans in the neighborhoods because they're kuffar. Tell me that the Prophet ﷺ would have sold alcohol and sold pork, sold khinzir, even to non-Muslims. It's haram even on non-Muslims. Are you serious? So now are we saying that it's okay to sell pork and alcohol to non-Muslims because they're kuffar and they're going to hell anyway? Was that the position of the Prophet ﷺ? Is that the position of Islam as it relates to non-Muslims? That is why they can walk past you and not give you the salam. That is why they can see you as an African American and look right past you, because you mean absolutely nothing to them, because you are the same trash that accepted Islam from your local ghettos, your local hoods, that they sold you pork and alcohol. They sold you blunts. They sold you picket tickets for the picket. They sold you everything in their religion that's haram. Everything. Everything in their religion that's haram, they push it out into the black community. Push it out into the black community. You understand? And this is why when you convert to Islam, you walk into the store, you got to throw one. Oh, you Muslim, brother? Yeah, I'm Muslim. Oh, salam alaikum. Right? This is where that comes from. Because it's the disdain. It's the disdain that they have for us as a people. And then when we convert to Islam, it's like we're an exception to the rule, but we're still connected to the rule. You understand? This is why when African Americans are shot, murdered, killed, whatever, you can sit back from a place of privilege and say, hey, I feel sorry for you guys. Hope everything work out for you guys. You know, we're standing over here. We're with you, right? But you're really not, because you're the same people that help to create the conditions that make us who we are. You are the same people that help to create the conditions that make them the way that they are. You sell them alcohol, you sell them pork, you sell them, you sell them pickets, you sell them, they can go play the picket at your store. They can go buy blunts at your store. And then when you don't like them, then you can call the cops on them. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I am encouraging every Muslim. If you live in Minneapolis, you live in New York, you live in New Jersey, and there's a Muslim-owned bodega, corner store that sells alcohol, sells liquor, wallah al-azim, don't buy nothing from them. Nothing. and speak truth to power. Go into the store and tell them that what they're selling is haram. Tell them that they are contributing to the conditions of these same people that you look down on. The same people that you see as scum of the earth, that you feel so comfortable selling them alcohol and pork and earning your living off of them. The same people, you are contributing to that condition that they are in. You are contributing to that condition. And I'm not buying nothing out of your store. How you sit back and condemn a group of people and you have helped to create the condition that they're living in. You have helped to contribute to the condition that they're living in. So, the American Muslim community finds itself caught in the crossfire of a social revolution, trying earnestly to stay neutral in a state of injustice where the neutrality lends to the position of the oppressor, not the oppressed. By you being neutral, this neutral position that you're taking, you are lending to the position of the oppressor, not the oppressed. And I'm sure that the Prophet ﷺ would be ashamed of many of you. I'm sure the Messenger of Allah ﷺ would be ashamed of many of you. SubhanAllah. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Muslim community the accolade of being the best of nations raised forth for mankind. Pay attention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You are the best of nations. Oh, you Muslims, you are the best of nations raised forth for mankind. That is a divine accolade giving to the Muslim community as a whole. Not because they're Arabs, not because they speak Arabic, not because they have light skin, not because they come from Arabia where it's rich and wealthy, not because they have a certain last name. You are the best of nations raised forth for mankind. Why? Please tell me. Finish the rest of the ayah. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You are the best of nations raised forth for mankind. Why? Tell me why. Because it has nothing to do with skin color, has nothing to do with how much money you have, has nothing to do with what type of country you come from, doesn't have anything to do with your lineage. What does it have to do with? Why this divine accolade? Why? تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, because you enjoin what is good. وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, and you forbid what is evil. You understand? That is where the divine accolade comes from. You enjoin what is good and you forbid what is evil. What is good is justice, fairness amongst all people. And you stop what is wrong, injustice against all people. You understand? This was not because they chose neutrality during times of blatant injustice of minority groups, but because of the exact opposite. They speak truth to power even in the tragedy of circumstances. They speak truth to power even in the tragedy of circumstances, for it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. I'll say that again. It is no measure of health, no measure of health, right, to be well adjusted in a profoundly sick society. Here you go to, your suburban house, you pray in your masjid, your mosque, this big decorated mosque, and then you come down into the slums of the ghetto with the ghetto people and you sell them pork and alcohol and lottery tickets, and you sell them all of this crap, and then you go back into your suburban neighborhood, your kids go to Islamic school, you go to a huge mosque, and then you come next day, tomorrow, go back into the slums and sell them pork, sell them alcohol, dealing with fraudulent checks and dealing with fake $20 bills and calling the cops on this scum, and then you go back, right? You're well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. It is no measure of health, meaning you are just as sick as the people that you condemn. You are just as sick as the same scum that you sell alcohol and pork and lottery tickets to. It is no measure of health to be, to be well adjusted in a profoundly sick society. What we are experiencing today is the residue of generational oppression, prejudice, and injustice which our grandparents did not have the chance to finish eradicating. And here we are today getting bit by the same snake all over again. The nature of oppression is continuity until it is confronted with an equally powerful force that will completely eliminate it. That's why that there's some oppression that you have to fight against, because the nature of dhulm, the nature of oppression is continuity, is to continue until it is met with an equal power, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayat that I mentioned in the khutbah, that if Allah had not used one group of people to chase off the oppression of another group, there would have been much corruption, there would have been much oppression, there would have been much persecution. So Allah uses one group to combat the oppression of another group. You understand? Oh, the nature of oppression is continuity, to continue. There is no sitting down peacefully waiting for people to recognize our worth as human beings. That is not going to happen. Not with this devil, not with this oppression that we're dealing with. No. Peaceful protest is for people who recognize your humanity. When you're dealing with an animal, you're dealing with a devil that don't see you as a human being at all. There is no peaceful protesting with that. There is no peaceful protesting with that. You can't bargain or negotiate with that because they don't even see you as a human being. Period. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when truth comes, إِذَا جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَّهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ, that when truth comes, falsehood vanishes. That's the way that it works. Truth is the only powerful force that can make falsehood go away. If you pandering and you placating and you're being, politically correct, falsehood is always going to exist. Falsehood is always going to exist. One of the oppressive leaders in the early Islamic times, his name was Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. This oppressive leader was responsible for killing a few of the Sahaba and many of the Tabi'un. One thing that the scholars mentioned towards his credit, is that there was a person of innovation who fabricated thousands and thousands of hadith on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Hajjaj ibn Yusuf found out that he was fabricating hadith, and he was an oppressor, but nonetheless, the scholars mention this to his credit. When they found out that this individual was fabricating thousands of hadith on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they caught him, they imprisoned him. And right as they were getting ready to kill him, he said mockingly, "What are you going to do about the thousands of hadith that I fabricated and I spread about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?" And it was said to him, I don't know if Hajjaj said it, but someone said to him, "And what are you going to do about Abdullah ibn Mubarak and so and so and so and so? يفتشها حرفا حرفا حديثا حديثا حتى يفرق بين الضعيف والصحيح." It said that what are you going to do about the likes of Abdullah ibn Mubarak and so and so and so and so from the scholars of hadith who will investigate every single letter and every single hadith that you put out there, and they will separate and distinguish truth from falsehood, and Hajjaj killed him. What I'm using that to say is that his falsehood could not have been dealt with any other way. You understand? جاء الحق وزهق الباطل. That when truth comes, falsehood vanishes. Truth comes, falsehood vanishes. When you're dealing with oppression, that is not going to go away. It's like dealing with a bully in school. If you keep being nice to the bully is going to continue bullying you. It's only after you stand up to the bully, even if you get beat up. Because when you're dealing with the bully, it's not about winning. It's about letting them know that you can't do that to me. You're not going to do that to me and get away with it. You understand? It's not about beating a bully. Because when you're dealing with the bully, you have nothing to lose anyway. Either he's going to continue bullying you or you're going to stand up for yourself, get your behind whooped, but he will know the next time you try to take something away from me is not going to be easy. And we continue to get murdered after murder after murder after murder. And they know we ain't going to do nothing. They know we ain't going to do nothing. Because our guns and our energy is only reserved for us. Let somebody else put their hands on your brother or your sister. Oh, we're going to send the whole goon squad to come wipe you off the face of the earth. But the police do it, we're going to protest against police brutality. Because our energy, our guns, our energy is only reserved for us. We don't use that against anybody else. Where the gang members? Where the goons at? I'm just curious. We're the gang members, where everybody on Instagram flashing their guns. We're all the gang members. We're all the goons. Where they at? Where they at? Please tell me. Because none of this stuff means anything to them. Because the only time that they load their guns up and they bring that energy is when you violate one of them personally. Because they don't operate on principles outside of their own circle, their own immediate group. And that reminds us of some of us as Muslims. The only time we want to get involved is when it involves somebody from our immediate group. And so there's nothing more powerful in the face of injustice than an impartial tongue. There is nothing that is more powerful in the face of injustice than lisan al-mizan, is an impartial tongue, a tongue that will speak freely without any fear. A tongue that will speak freely without any fear. There's nothing that is more powerful against injustice than that. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, أعظم الجهاد, the greatest form of jihad, kalimatul haq in the sultan al-ja'ir, is a kalimatul haq, is the true word, to speak the truth in the sultan al-ja'ir, to speak the truth in the face of power, to speak the truth to an oppressive ruler. That is the greatest form of jihad. The Prophet ﷺ, for the Muslim community, I want you guys to listen to this. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, ما من قوم يعمل فيهم بالمعاصي ثم يقدرون على أن يغيروا ثم لا يغيروا إلا يوشك أن يعمهم الله منه بعذاب. The Prophet ﷺ said, ما من قوم, there's no group of people. Muslim community, listen to me. Muslim community, listen to me. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, ما من قوم, there is no group of people, يعمل فيهم بالمعاصي, who there is people amongst them that are engaging in sin. And the greatest sin here we're talking about is injustice. The greatest sin, injustice, here we're talking about injustice. There's no group of people, and there's a group of people who are doing injustice in their midst. ثم يقدرون على أن يغيروا ثم لا يغيروا, and they have the ability to change that condition, but they refuse to do so. إلا يوشك أن يعمهم الله منه بعذاب, except that it is fearful, it is possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send a punishment against all of them. Send a punishment against all of them. This establishes for us the communal obligation to stand united against the oppressor and stand in solidarity with the oppressed. To stand in solidarity with the oppressed. Not stand in solidarity with the LGBT community. Not stand in solidarity with gays and lesbians dancing in the street. Now is an opportunity for you to really stand in solidarity with somebody who's being oppressed, and all we hear is crickets. From Muslim leadership to selective advocacy and, to the end of it. All we hear is crickets. Now you have a grand opportunity to stand in solidarity with people who actually deserve your solidarity. And where are we? We on Twitter posting jokes, right? We on Twitter making jokes with other imams and others, other individuals of supposedly of knowledge. That's what we're doing. We're on Twitter making jokes with people back and forth, right? But when we have an opportunity to stand in solidarity, that just lets you know where you stand. For all of you who go back and listen to this person lecture and you praise this person and you praise that person, listen to the person's words, man. Listen to what the person is not saying. Listen to what the person is not saying. It reminds me of an interview that Tupac had some time ago, and he said about the rappers that would come. He said, listen to what they're saying and hold them accountable. Stop bopping your head to the beat. We get caught up in the celebrity, the sensationalization of Sheikh Fulan and Dr. Fulan and Sheikh Fulan and Dr. Fulan. You still bopping your head to the music, but you're not listening to the words. Listen to what they're not saying. Listen to what they're not saying. If you're a Muslim imam and you on Twitter right now and you passing jokes back and forth during this time, that is telling us that the environment around you, you don't really take that serious. Listen to what the person is not saying and hold them accountable. Listen to what the person is not saying and hold them accountable. And many Muslims have been vocal about the atrocities done. If you think about it, right before coronavirus, it was what was going on in India, right? And Yasser Qadhi, was posting so much about India and what's going on in India and how sad what's going on in India. Wallah al-Azim, just our whole Twitter was flooded with posts and messages about what was happening in India and how they were being oppressed and images of Indians, being oppressed and Muslims, Not one word about what's going going on right here, right here in your own country. Selective advocacy, selective activism. And I mean, it doesn't bother me that you don't care. I don't care one way or another. I'm just pointing this out to you guys who hold these people to such high standards. And in my eyes, they full of, shit, full of it. Because if your knowledge does not push you to become a warrior for truth, then is it really knowledge you're sitting on? Is it really knowledge that you're sitting on? Because when you think back to scholars of the past, these men were for truth. They put their lives on the line. They put their lives on the line. And there were scholars of hadith, scholars of tafsir, put their lives on the line. You understand? Because that's what knowledge does. It gives you this sense of overprotectiveness over people. That's what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam represented. I'm not talking about the statements that he made. I said, pay attention to what he's not saying. You're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. Listen to what he's not saying. Because we get caught up in mashallah, this person gave a nice lecture. The last thing we need right now is a lecture. This is not a lecture. This is a conversation. This is a discussion right now that we're having. This is not a lecture. The last thing that we need is a lecture on racism in Islam. Why the hell we need to learn about racism in Islam? We already know what racism is, what Islam says about racism. He talked about his father's experience, mashallah. Here again, deflecting. Nothing of what your father went through is nowhere near close to what our ancestors have gone through. I don't want to hear a Muslim scholar from a different culture talking about the experiences of his father or anybody from his culture when this is what we are focusing on. This is why we say Black Lives Matter. We're not taking away from other people's lives matter, but other people's lives are not at stake right now. I don't want to hear about what happened to your father, your grandfather, or what goes on in your country. I don't want to hear about that right now. Black Lives Matter right now. Black Lives Matter right now. That's what we're dealing with right now. Don't tell me about what happened to my father when he came here 50 years ago. I don't want to hear about that. Honestly, with all due respect. Right, exactly, hijacking our experience. And back to Linda Sarsour, who wrote this whole piece, this whole Facebook piece, and then, exonerating the immigrant community. Oh, they hire locally, and they don't sell pork, and they don't sell alcohol, and, they're so nice, to the black community. And the actual person who called the police was a 17-year-old black girl. Like, wow. You really would go that far to throw a 17-year-old kid under the bus just to kind of soften the blow on the immigrant community? Just to try to make the immigrant community look like they're not that bad? Meanwhile, you an immigrant and you know the stuff that they say about African Americans. You know how they feel about African Americans. How dare you? And you throw a 17-year-old girl under the bus. And then when some of the Muslims started to comment on why would you put a 17-year-old girl out there? Why was the need to mention her age? Why was there a need to mention, that she was African American? Because what you were trying to do was say, see, we didn't have, the Palestinian store owner didn't actually call the cops. It was actually the 17-year-old black girl who called the cops. Here again, it's almost like saying, well, you guys, you actually kill each other too. So why are you making such outrage when the police kill you guys? But I don't see you guys making any outrage when you guys kill each other. You understand what I'm saying? That is exactly what you did. That's exactly what she did. That's exactly what she did. So you would risk throwing a 17, that's just, like, don't go to no more her rallies. Don't give this woman no more of your attention. Selective advocacy. And then she erased it. Then when some people start calling her out on it, then she erased black and 17 and then trying to make it seem like the people were trolling her. When in fact, people had already taken screenshots of the fact that you mentioned her age and you mentioned she was African American. And even if a 17-year-old black girl called the cops, we understand as a 17-year-old black girl, she's not calling the cops on her own. She didn't do that on her own. What she did was call the store owner, and the store owner gave the permission to call the cops. She didn't act on her own. So don't put that on the 17-year-old black girl who called the cops and then say, well, she's the one that actually called the cops. So, take it up with her. As for the Arab community, we didn't do anything wrong. It's like, are you serious? Are you serious? But these are the games that people play. So many Muslims have been vocal about the atrocities done in Pakistan, India, Palestine, and there are atrocities, no doubt about it. I'm not taking that away. But the selective activism is the problem that I have. Because we'll collect money for Palestine, we'll collect money for Syria, we'll collect money for, this one, we'll collect money for that one. But then, you have Muslims right here in your own country that need help, that need assistance. And even the vast majority of scholars are of the opinion that sending your zakat abroad is actually not even permissible. So when you think about a lot of these Islamic organizations who do all these fundraisers for India, do all these fundraisers for Pakistan, all these fundraisers for Syria, all of these fundraisers for Palestine. And while they do need the help, so do people right here in your own locality. How do you skip past the people that are right here in your own locality who are deserving of zakat? Muslims, an African-American woman or African-American guy who is poor, who meets the conditions for someone who is deserving of zakat, you skip right past him and you'll go give the zakat to someone from your country. You'll give the zakat to this organization, and this organization will send that zakat to their country. Selective advocacy, selective activism. It goes on. But the scholars, the vast majority of the scholars of fiqh are of the opinion نقل الزكاة من بلد المركزي إلى بلد أخرى لا يجوز. That taking your zakat and sending it to another country other than the land that you live in is not even permissible. And that was based upon the hadith of Mu'adh when the Prophet ﷺ said, صَدَقَةٌ تُؤْخَذُ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ وَتُرَدُّ فِي فُقَرَائِهِمْ. That is zakat. Inform them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made obligatory upon them zakat that is taken from their wealthy and given to their poor. Their poor, the poor of the land that you live in. The poor of the land that you live in. But we'll take it and we'll send it abroad. Injustice in the Muslim community is very rarely dealt with. Our own injustices are not dealt with. So how could we look to the Muslim community and expect for them to stand and address the injustices that are going on in the larger community? Now we're talking about the African American Muslim community, because we should be ashamed of ourselves. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. The levels of silence that we've not heard, that we've heard the silence. You know what I'm saying? We've heard the silence from many African American Muslim communities. Not even so much as, we stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, or just a hashtag Black Lives Matter, or just anything, nothing, crickets. But it shouldn't be that surprising, because we don't deal with injustices even within our own communities. We don't deal with injustices. How many sisters, Like, how many sisters have gone to the masjid, oppressed by their husbands, and the masjid has done nothing. The imam has done nothing on a small scale. So how could you expect for them to jump out there on a larger scale and begin to address, the oppression and the persecution and the atrocities that we see in the larger human community? You understand? We don't even address the injustices that go on in our own communities. So injustice is very seldomly or rarely dealt with in our own community, much less the injustices that are done outside of our communities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, pay attention to this, because some of us, we really think we've made this separation, right? We made this separation, especially I'm talking about African Americans, right? We've made this distinction, and this is part of our problem, which is why we have this detachment, right? That's the kuffar over there. Those are non-Muslims over there. We don't have nothing to do with that. That ain't our fight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, pay attention to this ayah, surah number 4, ayah 36. If you have a Quran with you, turn to surah number 4, ayah 36. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَجَارِ الْجُنُبِ وَالصَّاحِبِ بِالْجَنْبِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ مُخْتَالًا فَخُورًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this ayat, worship Allah, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. Worship Allah alone and don't associate partners with Him. He said, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And to your parents, be dutiful. Be dutiful to your two parents. Be good to your two parents. وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى. And to your relatives. وَالْيَتَامَى. And the orphans. وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. And the poor. Now mind you, Allah is not specifying their religion or their religious affiliation. He said, al-yatama wal-masakin, right? Yatama, which is, the orphans, wal-masakin, and the poor, the needy. Allah doesn't say their religious affiliation for us to make this distinction. Then He says, وَجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. And your neighbor who is your relative, وَجَارِ الْجُنُبِ. And your neighbor who is not your relative, not Muslim, not your relative, no affiliation, no association with them, just on the fact that they're your neighbor in humanity. وَالصَّاحِبِ بِالْجَنْبِ. And your companion on the side, وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. And the wayfarer, the traveler in the land. وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, as well as your right hand possessions, meaning your servants, your slaves, your concubines. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ مُخْتَالًا فَخُورًا. Allah does not like any arrogant boaster. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is identifying all of the people that is deserving of ihsan. And the best way, the word ihsan, which is a generic phrase. It doesn't just mean one type of good or another. All levels of good. This is why it is still left in the nekira. It's not definite. There's no alif wa lam. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Levels of good. Much good to do to them. All right? And the best way to do good to someone is to make sure that they are treated fairly and justly. The best way to do good to anybody, the greatest good that you can extend to anybody, outside of calling them to Islam if they're non-Muslims, is to make sure that they are dealt with fairly and justly. Al-adl. To make sure that the person is dealt with fairly and justly. That is the greatest ihsan. That is the greatest good that you can extend to anybody. And this is why the greatest form of oppression is what? Shirk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran on the tongue of Luqman when he's advising his son, he said, Inna shirka la dhulmun azim. That shirk, taking away Allah's right and giving it to someone else, is the greatest form of oppression. It is the greatest form of injustice. Shirk is the greatest form of injustice. And that means that the greatest form of jihad is to speak truth to injustice. To return the right back to the one that you took from them. And so, one of the responsibilities in our community is to stand up for justice against everybody. Anybody that is being treated unfairly and unjustly, we are to extend that to them. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what their religious affiliation is. It doesn't matter who they are. But to see someone oppressed, to see someone being taken advantage of, and then not extend anything to them, then we have not done to them ihsan. We have not done ihsan to them. And so, therefore, it moves me into my next. That's the Muslim community. The silence that is deafening. The deafening silence it's really hard. As I put in my post the other day, it's going to be very hard for some imams to mount the minbar after this is all said and done, and for people to take you serious. It's going to be really hard for you to get on the minbar on a Friday and address a whole community at this point, knowing that at the time when the community needs you, you said absolutely nothing. How are we going to take you serious? How are we going to look at you as a leader in the Muslim community and take you serious when in the time that the community needed you, you said absolutely nothing? Nothing. Even during the coronavirus pandemic, you have many imams who were silent, said nothing. Nothing. The Muslim community is sitting around waiting for guidance, waiting for instructions, waiting for, from the community. We pull up at the masjid on Friday and the masjid is closed, padlocked, no address, no weekly address, no nothing. Nothing. Ain't heard or seen from the imam in months. Haven't heard or seen the imam in months. Haven't seen or heard from the board members in months. You pull up at the masjid doors are closed. No general announcement. No, let's have a community meeting and let's discuss the plans for how we're going to move and what we're going to do and the projections and keeping the community informed. WhatsApp group, text messages, just kind of keeping the community informed. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing up until right now, nothing. And now here we are in the middle of another pandemic and still nothing, silence. So it has me scratching my head saying, what are we dealing with here? What are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with leadership? We dealing with leadership here? Or are we just dealing with people who just employees filling a position? Because that's what it seems like. It seems like imams, students of knowledge, All of these different terms, shuyukh and all of this other stuff, we're dealing with employees who are filling a position. They are actually being told what to do, but no leadership. And that's part of the problem. That is part of the problem. We allow people to hide behind these titles, student of knowledge, which I don't even know what that means. Student of knowledge, imam, sheikh, fulan, doctor, all of these different titles, yet it bears no responsibility to the larger community at all. None. Instagram, you're going to cut off. I'll cut you back on. Bears no responsibility to the larger community. And so what we are essentially lacking, right? What we are essentially lacking is we are lacking leadership. We are lacking in leadership. We have all of the students of knowledge in the world, and that's great. But where's the leadership? That's my question. Where is leadership? That's my question. And so someone might say, okay, well, what does leadership actually even look like? Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a description of what a leader looks like. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a small description in one ayah. One ayah gave us a small description of what leadership looks like. In Surah At-Tawbah, Surah number 9, ayah 128, listen to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. Pay attention to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam so that we can understand what leadership looks like. First, he said, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Indeed, there has come to you a messenger, مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ, from amongst yourselves. What does that mean? What does that mean? Indeed, there has come to you a messenger from amongst yourselves. Meaning the Prophet ﷺ was from amongst the Arabs. He understood their culture. He understood their experiences. He understood their language. You understand? He understood his people. He never detached himself from the fact that he's an Arab. Tell me, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for all you African-American Muslims who say, I'm Muslim first. I'm not African-American. I don't affiliate or associate with that. I'm just Muslim. Well, genius, please tell me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam an Arab. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam an Arab. Did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever disassociate or detach himself from his community? Did he ever say he's not an Arab? Meanwhile, you got African Americans running around talking about, I'm not African American, I'm just Muslim. And anybody who identifies as black or African American is somehow nationalistic. Meanwhile, you could be a Palestinian Muslim, nobody will say anything. You could be a Turkish Muslim, nobody will say anything. You're a Yemeni Muslim, nobody says anything. You're Egyptian Muslim, nobody says anything. African American Muslim, oh, you're a racist, you're a nationalist. This is from within our own ranks. The ignorance of our own ranks. Meanwhile, the Prophet ﷺ never denounced his culture, never denounced his where he came from. But here you got us still trying to figure out where in the world do we belong. You still trying to figure out where you belong. He was from amongst his people. Nobody knows his people better than him. أهل مكة أعلم بشعابها. That the people of Mecca, they are more aware of their streets and their pathways and, their people, they have more knowledge of that. Meanwhile, the Prophet ﷺ never denounced this culture. That's the only way that you can be effective amongst your people, is to understand their struggles, understand their experiences, understand their language, speak to them in their language. You understand? لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ, that there has come to you a messenger from amongst yourselves. And that's the biggest mistake that many students of knowledge make when they go overseas to study and they come back. They literally have an identity crisis. You're walking around with white thobes on. You're showing up to, events. Wallah al-Azim, I had a brother. Wallah al-Azim, we was trying to get the brother a job. This job required you to wear a suit, tie, dress professionally, right? This brother shows up to he needed a job, just came home from Yemen, just came home from Egypt, wherever he came home from. And he needed a job. I was already working, I had already integrated back into society. Reality set in that, you're not going to be a student of knowledge for the rest of your life. You got to work. You have a family. You have a wife. You have children. You have to work. You can be a student of knowledge, but that has to be part-time. You're a father full-time. You're a husband full-time. You're a student of knowledge part-time. You understand? Reality set in. The brother comes home from Egypt. He needs a job. I tell the brother to come up to the job and talk to the boss. We're going to get you in there. Don't worry about it. This brother shows up to the job interview with a white thobe on, with sneakers with no socks on. That's the type of stuff that I'm talking about. He shows up to the job interview with a white thobe on, with sneakers with no socks on. I love the brother. I'm not finding fault with him. I'm just saying how the identity crisis. Identity crisis. And some of our leadership are still suffering from an identity crisis. You denounce your own culture. You divorced your own culture. Now everything is Saudi Arabia. Now everything is the scholars say. Now everything the shuyukh say. Our father. Hell, you don't even acknowledge your own biological father. You calling the scholars your father? What part of the game is that? I'm confused. Al-Walid, a Sheikh, Fulan, you calling this scholar who lives thousands and thousands of miles away, don't even know your first name, don't even know your real name, but you calling him your father, your own biological father, you don't even recognize him, you don't even acknowledge him. You understand? Identity crisis. And that is why many of our leaders can disassociate themselves and detach themselves from what is happening to African Americans out in the street right now, because that is not your problem. That are kuffar, those are non-Muslims, those are African Americans. I'm Muslim. And you put yourself in this little bubble. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Muslims see you to be no different than the people you trying to disassociate yourself from. What part of that don't you understand? No, he didn't get hired. Of course not. Even though we already had the job locked away from him, all he had to do was show up. But when he showed up in his thobe with sneakers with no socks on, you didn't even show up with a thobe on, with a suit jacket and, hard bottom shoes. You didn't even try to look professional. Because you still think you in Yemen. You still think you in Egypt somewhere. It doesn't work like that. But here you are trying to disassociate yourself from the very people that you are from the very people who your message would be most impactful to. Which is why I don't sugarcoat my words. I know who my audience is. I can talk if I'm speaking to, a college, crowd. I'm speaking to the people who are from the higher levels of academia, from the upper tiers of, the academic, crowd. I could talk in that manner if I chose to. But those are not the people that I'm tailoring my message to. I'm tailoring my message to the people who look like me, who come from the same struggles that I come from. Because I found in my experience that people who come from the struggles and the experiences that I come from, when they embrace Islam, when they embrace the Haqq, they are the most sincere and genuine people you can ever come across. They are the most sincere and most genuine people that you can come across. You understand? So those are the people that I tailor my message to. So while other people look at it as, oh, well, he yells too much. Oh, he moves his hands too much. Oh, what, that's cool. My message is not for you. Go find somebody else that's going to ignite your fire. I'm not your guy. I'm not the guy for you. But put me in a crowded room with a bunch of gangsters, with a bunch of people who come from the hood, come from the streets, come from the experiences that I come from, and I can guarantee you that my message will reach them. Guaranteed you. Bi-idhnillah, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I can guarantee you my message will reach them. You understand? Because those are the people who I cater to. That is who I tailor my message to. There comes to you a messenger from amongst yourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that we have never sent a messenger before. إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ. That we have never sent a messenger before you except we sent him in the tongue of his own people. Understanding their language, understanding their culture. Culture and language go hand in hand. But what we have is a bunch of individuals who have gone to another country, studied Islam, and have detached and disassociated themselves from their very own culture. So now when we're in situations like this where we need their voices to speak out against the atrocities that are going on to the people in their culture, mum's the word. Mum's the word. Because they don't feel that that is their struggle. They don't feel that that is their problem. They don't feel that that is their issue. They have completely disassociated and detached themselves from their people. Which is why Sheikh Raghi can get on a minbar and say that majority of the African Americans were born out of wedlock, basically calling our mothers prostitutes. Because the lecture, the khutbah that he was given was about polygyny, talking to Somali women about accepting polygyny. So basically saying, you don't want to end up like the African American women whores who give birth to the children who are out of wedlock. That was the nature of the khutbah that he was given on the minbar. And then to have African-American imams say, oh yeah, it was a mistake, but I understand where he was coming from. You know how slap in the face that is? There's people I don't talk to right now because of that. Do you know what a slap in the face that is to say, oh, I've known Sheikh Raghi all my life. And I know he made a mistake, but I know the brother's intention. I know what he meant. I know it's well. How the hell can you say somebody meant well when you get on a minbar in public and disgrace an entire nation of people? Call their mothers whores. Because if you say that we are a nation of bastard children, what are you saying about our mothers? What are you saying about my mother? Because my mother is from amongst those same women that you are criticizing. Even if you felt like that in public with no fear of any backlash of any sort, because you had placating African-American students of knowledge who go and rush to the rescue. Oh, I know what the brother meant. This is why you can say that. This is why I was enraged. This is why I was enraged. And I said what I said because I'm sorry. I am connected to my people. You understand? I am connected to my people. What hurts them hurts me. You don't think when I look out and you see the African Americans now looting and taking stuff, like your heart hurts because you understand they're ignorant and they're just falling victim to the trap. The trap was to hijack the protests. That was the whole issue. The protests started off as something legitimate. And then, of course, you had your agent provocateurs. You had even undercover police in the crowd. And then, of course, the lower tier, lower level African Americans who got involved and they just hijacked the entire mission, man. So now the spotlight, the focus is on the looting, not on the protesting. And here again, still making African Americans look like animals, still making African Americans look at these people climbing out of windows, busting windows. You understand what I'm saying? And keep in mind, the news are only reporting the black looting. They're not showing white faces that are looting because in reality, the white people are the ones that are doing most of the looting. They're doing most of the tagging up and spray painting buildings and busting windows. You have the black people who are actually defending Target and defending some of these businesses from some of these looters. But you will never see that. You will never see that. But I am attached to my community. I'm attached to my people, even the stuff about them that I don't like. Even the stuff that's still my people. Still my people. I don't care. There's things about them that I don't like. Absolutely. There are things that go on in Saudi Arabia that the scholars speak out against. But you will never see them denounce their people. You will never see them disassociate themselves from their people or make this distinction. Those are the sinful Saudis over there, but we're the elite, God-fearing and obedient servants over here. No, there's things about our culture, about every culture that we all dislike. But I will never separate myself and disassociate and detach myself from my people. You got to be kidding me. That's where our identity lies. That's where the root of where we come from. But then you can go to the Somali imam and say, he made a mistake. I understand where he was coming from. He shouldn't have said it like that. Man, freak all of that. You got to be kidding me, man. You get on the minbar so callously and you throw that out there like that. Man, don't ever speak to me again. Ever. Ever. Because it wasn't the fact of what you said. It was the fact that you meant it. That's how you really feel. That's the problem. It's not so much what you said. It's the fact that that's the way you felt. That's the way you felt. You see us as scum. You see us as nothing. And you expose that on the minbar. You allowed, as I said, the title of my lecture was A Drunk Mind Speak a Sober Heart. You was intoxicated in your rage, but what came out of your heart, what came out of your mouth came straight from your heart, and you know it. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You don't see me nothing more than a nigga, a black African-American ghetto nigga. That's all you see me as. I'm cool with that. It ain't going to change my life one iota, period. But I'm just making it clear that what you said is unacceptable to me. I ain't making no excuses for you. I see it for what it is. But you got other African-American imams. I know him all my life, and I know he didn't mean it like that. Blah, blah. How else would a person mean it? But the reason why you can do that is because you are detached. It's called cultural apostasy. You have apostated from your own culture. And go find yourself. If you're an African-American imam, a student of knowledge on a minbar right now, and you don't have any connection or any association, affiliation with your people, then you need to go find yourself, man. Go find yourself. Go on a hiatus and go find yourself. Go out into the woods, go do what Left Eye did and go find yourself. Go out into the woods somewhere and stay there for a month until you come to terms with who the hell you are and what your purpose is. This whole idea of we're all one ummah. Yeah, in theory, we are all one ummah. In theory, we are one ummah. In practical application, I'm sorry, I see the lines drawn in the sand. And I've already chosen my side. I've chosen my side, and I'm cool with that. I can die meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being totally comfortable with the choice that I've made. Number two, to feel, not even before I even move on to number two, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, let me ask you a question. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Mecca and he saw the struggle of many of the slaves who, were being tortured and being, oppressed or whatever the case may be, did he not come to their aid? Question, were there non-Muslims in Mecca who saw what the Muslims were going through and stood in solidarity with them? Question. The Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims were in Mecca, small group, being oppressed, being persecuted, and many of the non-Muslims who are Arabs, who saw what they were going through, stood in solidarity with them because they didn't like oppression. They didn't like, some people have a high sense of justice, and I don't care who it is. I don't like seeing nobody oppressed. I don't like seeing somebody being taken advantage of. You understand? So much so that the Prophet ﷺ, when after the Battle of Badr, when they had the 70 captives after the Battle of Badr, pay attention to this. After the Battle of Badr, the Prophet ﷺ captured 70 of Quraysh. And he went to some of the Sahaba trying to figure out what he should do with them. He went to Umar, he said, what should we do with these 70 captives? Umar said, you should give Aqil to Ali and let him cut his head off. And Aqil was Ali's brother. That was his brother. That was his brother. He said, you should give Aqil to Ali and you should let him cut his head off. You should give so-and-so to me and let me cut his head off. The Prophet ﷺ was like, Umar, I'm sorry, I'm not going with that. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Wallahi, lo kana Mut'im ibn Addi hayyan. وكلمني في هؤلاء لأعطيتهم إياه. He said, Wallahi, he said, I swear by Allah, if Mut'im ibn Addi, who was a non-Muslim, Mut'im ibn Addi, who was a non-Muslim, he said, Wallahi, if Mut'im ibn Addi was alive today and he was to speak to me on behalf of these 70 captives, I would give him the 70 captives because of what he did for me in Mecca. When the Prophet ﷺ was returning from Ta'if back to Mecca, the chiefs of Quraysh did not want to let the Prophet ﷺ back into Mecca. They didn't want to let him back in Mecca. And they were waiting at the entrances. Mut'im ibn Adi, he told his sons to grab your swords, grab your bows and arrows. You take this corner of Mecca. You take that corner of Mecca. You take this corner of Mecca. You take that corner of Mecca. 4 sons. And he told his sons, if anyone lays a hand on Muhammad, then you lay him the rest. Anyone lay a hand on Muhammad, you lay him the rest. You understand? And he wasn't even Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if Mut'im ibn Adi was alive today and he spoke to me on behalf of the captives of Badr, I would let them go. To repay him for what he did for him. You understand? Some people don't like oppression. This was a non-Muslim standing up for the Muslims. And vice versa. In Mecca, there were times in which the Prophet ﷺ saw people being oppressed and he intervened, even though the people were not Muslim. You understand? Mut'im ibn Adi, he said, Wallahi, if any one of them lay a hand on Muhammad, you lay him the rest. You understand? And he gave the Prophet ﷺ asylum. He was able to come back into Mecca because of Mut'im ibn Adi, who told his 4 sons to guard the Prophet ﷺ when he comes back into Mecca. Don't let nobody lay a hand on him. You understand? Some people don't like oppression. So, I'm saying this to say that part of being a leader is to be connected to your community. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. There has come to you a messenger from amongst yourselves. عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. He feels the pain. He feels the pain of the people that he serves. Azizun alayhi ma anittum, that he is grieved by your suffering. Any difficulty you should fall into, he feels that. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ مَثَلَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ فِي تَوَادِّهِمْ وَتَعَاطُفِهِمْ وَتَرَحُمِهِمْ كَمَثَلِ الْجَسَدِ الْوَاحِدِ. That the example of the believers and their love for one another and their compassion for one another and their mercy towards one another is like one body. And although the Prophet ﷺ said that comment in relation to the Muslims, we could see his mercy towards mankind. As a matter of fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you except as a mercy for all of mankind. Except as a mercy for all of mankind. Not just for Muslims. We have to get out of this mentality that because they are non-Muslims, they are non-factors. We have to get out of this mentality that because they are non-Muslims and on top of that they're black, then they're somehow non-factors. La wallahi. La wallahi. Especially for African Americans. They're still part of the people that you are from, and they still require your mercy and your compassion. They still require your guidance. They still require your direction. They still require your guidance. They still require your direction. Don't detach yourself from them. Don't look at this idea of, oh, that's them over there. We're black Muslims over here. We're a separate entity. And to anybody who is not Muslim that are listening right now, we're hurting. We're hurting for what's going on right now. We're hurting for what's going on right now. And we make no distinction. Wa alaikum salam. Make no distinction between ourselves and people who are being oppressed. As Muslims, we are no strangers to oppression. Just 10 years ago, in 2020 years ago, we were the subject of oppression. How many non-Muslims stood in solidarity with us as Muslims? How many non-Muslims stood in solidarity with us when we were the subject of oppression? When Muslims were the subject of oppression? How many African American Muslims stood with Palestinians, stood with Yemenis, stood with people from other cultures who were subject of oppression? How many? And now when the shoe was on the other foot, mum's the word. Mum's the word. When many Arabs after 9/11 women were ready to take off their hijab, Muslim men shaving their beards, didn't want to associate or affiliate with anything Islamic or Muslim. It was African Americans who still came out with hijab on, still came out with beards, still came out with thobes. While everybody else was looking at us as, oh, they're extreme. Those are the extreme Muslims. Yeah, but we held on to Islam until this very moment. We held on to Islam to this very moment. We held on to Islam. Many of those Muslim children have no affiliation or association with Islam whatsoever. Many of them detached themselves from Islam altogether, believing that they could have the American dream just as long as it was not affiliated or associated with Islam. Many Muslim children, many of you Muslims have lost your children while we're still struggling. African Americans, we're still struggling. But we here, we holding on. We struggling, but we holding on. Yes, we got some work to do in our own communities, man, but please don't make it seem like we are the black eye of Islam. You gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. That if it wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then the African American Muslim community, many of you would not have the platforms that you have today. Many of you would not have the platforms that you have today. And if African American Muslim leaders don't step up to the plate, this is my thing, we got to work around them, period. These institutions that we call masajid, mosques, at this point are really obsolete. I'm just being honest with you. They're obsolete. And they should only be used for what they were built for from the door, and that is a place to pray. You go there to pray, but you ain't going there for no religious guidance. You ain't going there for no social services. You ain't going there for nothing because you ain't going to get it from there. We have to work around them and build our own, our own institutions, starting with schools. Schools, we need high schools. Our Muslim children, high school children, need to have Islamic education before they go into colleges. We're making a huge mistake by sending our children to public schools and then from the public school, high school, into college. Within that 4-year span of high school and in the first 2 or 3 years into college, they have lost all of their Islam. They have lost all of their Islam. And they're not getting it from the Muslim school. The Islamic school model for many of our children, African American children, it doesn't work for us. Our children are ostracized. Our children are labeled. Our children are, targeted by many Arab teachers, many Pakistani teachers. Make no mistake about that. I see it with my own eyes. I ain't speaking to you except what I know. ما شهدنا إلا ما علمنا. I bear witness to nothing except what I know. And I'm telling you truth. Many of our children, African American children, come out of these Islamic schools tormented. Tormented. They don't know if they're coming or going. They don't know if they're Arab or African American. They're not getting any socialization. They're not getting any, nurturing. They're not getting cultured. Because many of the teachers, even when they're teaching Islam, even when they're teaching other subject matters, they don't know how to make text to world connections. They don't connect what they're learning in school to what is waiting for them out there in the real world, which makes the teaching obsolete. Obsolete. I'm ready to start hearing when we're going to start. Those of you who are real estate agents, those of you who have money, those of you who have education. We need people who are real estate agents. We need people who have money, and we need brothers and sisters who are educated. Those are the 3 things that we need. The real estate officer, the real estate person, you're going to secure the property. The money person, you're going to pay for the property. And the educators, you are going to educate inside the property. That is the step. That is where we are right now. We're not teaching no more in the masjid. We're not sending our children to the masjid unless they're going to learn Quran. Period. The masjid is for, there's a tahfidh of Quran, they teaching Quran. Alhamdulillah, go to the masjid and go learn Quran. Go to the masjid and go pray. As for learning Islamic education and secular education, now we're separating ourselves from the mosque. That's it. We're done with the masjid. We need to work around these institutions that have kept us here for the longest. We're never going to progress. Because in order for you to have progress, you have to have forward-thinking leaders. And we don't even have leaders, much less forward-thinking. Much less forward-thinking. Every time you come up with an idea, every time you make a suggestion, it got to go through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 board members, all of whom are completely detached from the actual needs of the community. And every time you turn around, it gets knocked down. Every time you turn around, there's always an excuse. Every time you turn around, we always got something else going on. Every time you turn around, we're going to never progress. You guys keep following this model to continue doing the same things over and over, expecting different results is insanity. And some of you are insane. You continue to do the same thing over and over, and still there's no progress in our communities. Still no progress in our communities. We're not moving forward. We're losing our children. We're not moving forward. Constantly disconnected, constantly not being provided with guidance and direction for how to navigate the real world. You still taking us back 1441 years ago. We don't live during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Take that knowledge, take that information, and apply it to the environment that we're living in right now. If you can't do that, then step the hell down and let somebody else take that position. Step down and let somebody else take that position. Many imams, I told you, after this is over with, our conversations are going to be completely different. Conversations are going to be completely different. And I know all of these people talk about, oh, I don't take for him or this or that. You hear me now. I guarantee you hear me now. Because your fear is that what I'm saying is correct. Your fear is that somebody, the people out there are actually listening to this fool, listening to this idiot, and they're going to follow his advice. And I'm telling you guys, you keep following behind these people, you ain't going to never progress. You ain't going to never progress. You're going to be exactly where you are 10 years from now. How many years I've been saying this? This is not my first time saying this. For some of you who have now been recently reintroduced to me because you've been told don't take from me, and for 10 years you haven't taken from me, now all of a sudden you decide to get bold enough to go listen to one of my lectures. Now it's like the light bulb goes off. Oh, wow, mashallah, I agree with what he said. Man, I've been saying this for 15 years. This ain't the first time I've said this. It's not the second time I've said this. But this is the first time I say it, and I mean it, and I'm following up on it. These masajid, many of these imams, irrelevant, obsolete. And we're working around them at this point. No longer going through the masjid to ask your permission for anything. No longer going to the masjid to ask the imam permission for anything. You don't need the imam's permission. He is not a leader. He is an imam. He is an employee. He works for a board who pulls the strings and tells him exactly what to do. You can distinguish between an imam and a leader. A leader don't give a damn what the board say. A leader don't sit around and wait for consensus. The leader is the consensus. The leader don't sit around and wait for everybody to agree with him before he makes a move or before he makes a decision. That's not to say that he's rogue and he doesn't listen to anybody, but most of us are enemies to our own progress, and that's a fact. Most of us are enemies to our own progress, and that's a fact. And we need to just get out the way. Get out the way. That's my advice to many of the imams and students of knowledge right now. This fitna has shown us where we are. From COVID-19 to the protests and demonstrations that we see right now, many imams, many students of knowledge have already shown us who they are. You are not built for this. You're not built for this. Step on down, hang the microphone up, and go teach somewhere in your house. Go teach your family something, man. Go teach your family. You've been neglecting your family for years, man. Go teach your family. And let somebody who can really handle that position, let them step up to the plate and do it. But we need facilities. We need the educators are there. I know for a fact I can name at least 3 educators right now that is listening that I see their name popping up. I can name at least 3 or 4 educators right now that have the ability to teach. We don't have to open up a whole school. 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. That's all we need. All we need is a facility. All we need is a building. All we need is a top floor with 4 classrooms in it. 4 classrooms in it. And we need teachers, educators. I ain't talking about good brothers and sisters who hang around the masjid. I'm talking about people who are certified and that can actually teach. That's what I'm talking about. You want to make change? I'm giving you the blueprint for change right now. If y'all allow this lecture to finish and say, oh, mashallah, he gave a good talk and that's it, and nobody moves after that, then you on your own with that. You on your own with that. Many of you say, oh, well, he's not telling us what to do. I'm telling you what to do right now. You asking for direction, I'm giving you direction right now. And we need Islamic education. We need secular education that caters to the needs of our children. Continuously sending your children to the Islamic school model for most of our children does not work. For African American children, it does not work. Our children are confused. Our children are targets of blatant racism in many of these schools. Many of these children look into the classroom, look out into the classroom and target the African American child. Meanwhile, Ahmed and Fulana and Aisha, or whatever the case may be, they're terrorizing the whole damn school. The teacher never says anything to them. But yet, this African American girl, that African American boy always end up the target. Tell me I'm lying. Tell me I'm lying. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. We're in a building. We need a top floor, 4 or 5 classrooms in it. Educators, make it happen. It's not that difficult. You're sitting around waiting for the next Arab school to open up because, oh, they know the language. Well, then hire somebody who know Arabic. Hire somebody who know. You control the narrative. You control the school. That's your school, for us, by us. What part of that don't you understand? You can always hire somebody who speaks Arabic. You can always hire somebody who is half of the Quran to come and teach. But we control the education. We control the education. And we don't need nobody's permission to do that. We don't need anybody's permission to do that. Whether that is in Philadelphia, whether that is in Delaware, whether that is in Maryland, whether that is in New York, whether that is in New Jersey, we all have the ability to do that. You don't need nobody's permission to do that. But our children going from high school, those 4 years of high school, is critical. That will determine the rest of their lives. So critical time in their lives. During the COVID-19, I offered, my services on, I had to turn parents away. I could literally teach Islamic studies online. That's what this just showed us. I could literally set up my own online school. I would much rather like to teach in person, but this COVID-19 has shown us that we have the power to now teach online. We have the power to create our own schools. I'm sitting here I got 20 students outside of the students that I'm already teaching for in the school that I work with. I can just teach right here online. Light bulb goes off. I'm like, why I never did this before? It can be done. It can be done. Y'all can start online schooling right now. Start online schooling. Pull from the curriculums. Put together a curriculum. Come up with a name for your school. Start advertising. It's literally that simple. The other thing is that we have to get involved in politics. It's not necessarily my thing, But we have seen politicians like Ilhan Omar, councilmen, councilwomen, city councilwomen, and you out in the streets dancing around with the LGBT. We need serious people in politics. We need serious people that are really serious about making changes, because that is how we change the system from the inside. Your councilmen, your local councilmen, councilwomen, you know what I mean? We got people who got the gift of gab, who know how to, ignite the people. If I wanted to be a politician, I could be a politician. It's literally that simple. It's that simple. It's that simple. But we have many brothers and sisters who have been kind of teetering. I don't want to really get involved, but at this point, do we really have an option? Do we really have an option at this point? If we really want to start making changes for our community, then we have to have people in powerful positions who can make suggestions to, powerful people to make those moves happen. But the people that are in the positions now who are, dancing, to the beat of somebody else's drum, not catering to the Muslim community, you're Muslim until you get into the political position, then off comes the beard, off comes the hijab, tight clothes, and you're mingling and rubbing shoulders with this person and that person, and you totally forget about your community. That's not the type of politicians that I'm talking about. Those are not the politicians that we're talking about. We're talking about the politicians who get in those positions and are unapologetically Muslim and unapologetically for their communities. That's what I'm talking about. And it's needed. It's needed. It's as they say, akhaful darrain. It is the lesser of two evils. Is either we sit and we don't get involved in politics, and then we keep allowing clowns to dance in the circus and then just give us crumbs off the table, or we pull our straps up, pull our boots up, tighten up our boots, and we get involved. We get involved. People have to get involved in their municipalities and their localities. You got to get involved at this point. I know there's some people who have been hesitant about getting involved in politics. And then you got the Muslims saying, oh, we don't get involved in politics. Any Muslim that tell you we don't get involved in politics, we don't protest, we don't demonstrate, it's haram for this, ignore them, because they are a non-factor. They ain't going to never go anywhere. They're going to stay in their masjid, and they're going to be exactly who they are 30 years from now. The same individuals talking about everything is haram. Obviously, when you don't want to do something, everything is haram. When you don't feel like doing something, you just say it's haram. And you find some, random text to support what you're saying. And khalas, business as usual for you. Meanwhile, there's people who want to get involved, people who want to make real changes. Obviously, when